Humble here, and welcome to a Labyrinth TCG deck profile. Well, I'll be going over the Mufasa list I played to a top 16 finish in the Thea's 10K charity event. I'll be talking matchups, Mulligan strategies, strengths and weaknesses, and more, but first, let's look at the list itself. As you can see, this list is very straightforward, being almost 4-ofs entirely across the board. But why Humble? The answer is consistency. Your mulligan can be a point of contention, and we want equal chances to hit the cards we want to see in each matchup. We are playing arguably the most fair deck of the meta, so being consistent is a big key to success here. You may have noticed that this deck does nothing on turn 1. And for a lot of you, you may be questioning why. For starters, the 1-drops we have access to aren't very good. The ones that are good are only really good because of their shift lines. I decided that because there weren't any characters in the 1 slot that I want to see in later stages of the game, nor any that boasted a relevant stat line for early game versus any of the steel or red decks playing Teeth, I didn't play them at all. The negative tempo they generate for you in later stages of the game was a severe point of conflict for me in testing, and thus didn't make the cut. I do have a Perdita version that puts up good results that utilizes heavy 1s and 2s, but if we aren't on Perdita, I think I'm happy not playing 1-drops. Sleepy was also a card people were surprised by. I more than most. Up until the night before the event, this card was this card. Queen of Hearts was in the deck originally as a gacha style card to help the matchup against the green decks and Steel Song. However, Steel Song players have the ability to play around it for subsequent turns and games, and the cards it kills in green are getting value upon being challenged, so she wound up not being the threat or the removal tool I initially added her in the deck to be. And don't get me started on hitting her off of Mufasa.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Sleepy, on the other hand, checked all the boxes I wanted a card in this slot to fill. It's inkable, it quests for 2, it's got a great stat line. The fact that Interplay Exerted was not a problem for all of the Swiss rounds, and allowed for such powerful lore swings in the early turns of the game that he was a standout card in many of my matches. The Evasive package was one I was extremely satisfied with. They posed an incredible amount of uncontested lore that many of my opponents were unable to deal with. Each one was a great hit off Mufasa, as well as being a solid card on their own respective curve, the biggest reason for inclusion in Mufasa itself. Most players will set up a turn where they kill the Mufasa and have a character ready to challenge whatever character he brings out, and 9 times out of 10, they can't challenge the evasive card. The stat lines on Pongo and Goofy were relevant as they can be used as challengers that provide favorable trades without being pressured on a revenge challenge, as well as being lightning rods for most other removal in the game. Hold on, Humble. No matter Medusa? Nope. She's not a very good card in this style of deck. In a control deck, the card's amazing. But for us, it can't hit any of the cards we needed to hit. Sure, Beast and Robin are premium targets, but it feels like that's all she really hits. Lady Tremaine was the best overall choice because even though she doesn't always get the card you want, she always gets a card, and that's very important for board control. Scar was an amazing choice. Even in the event it never got to clear an opposing board, just having Maui's 5 and 6 as options versus locations was reason enough to include him. We can play him on turn 6 with a little bit of setup with Doc, and the card certainly overperformed. We only played 8, and it felt very, very good. With such a low uninkable count, the ability to ink every turn and actually have the ability to cast our top end is very formidable. Moving forward, I don't think I would play this deck in any iteration with more than 10 uninkable cards. On screen you see my matchup spread. Green Steel Discard was the only matchup that felt actually unwinnable all weekend. Green Purple can also provide tough if Ursula is allowed to copy a Mother Knows Best, but that matchup still feels very winnable. As you can see, I kind of had a miracle run in the later stages of the event, and was able to lock in 5th place overall after Swiss after 4 2-0s in the final 4 rounds. On screen will be some stats. Pause if you would like to read them. Did you pause? Nerd. Our mulligan strategies in this build don't change super dramatically very often, but there are times that the matchup requires a different set of tools that we need to look for. For our generic mulligan, we want to see Mother Gothel and Rapunzel in our opener against everything that isn't Steel Song. If we are playing against Steel, we want to see Simba or Sleepy as our preferred 2-drops. Remember, Steel Song wants to use a whole new world, so you are incentivized to keep your hand size relatively low to soften the blow and allow them to refresh your hand. Doc is our premier 3-drop, and is the card we want to be casting on 3 98% of the time. It is best to have a 5-drop to pair with Doc. If you don't have a 5-drop, then Minnie Mouse is our backup plan. An ideal generic mulligan would look something like this. Versus Steel Song, we want to prioritize Sleepy or Simba over Gothel on 2. 3 Ink Pongo is almost always in the Inkwell, as its 2 willpower stat does not line up very well against the opposing removal. Keep the hand size as low as you can and mulligan as many high cards as possible to hopefully save them for later game. Chernabog is incredible against them, using one of their deck's strengths against them. Use the evasive package to apply early pressure, and relish when their shifted Cindy's can't challenge anything. Versus Red Purple, we want the opposite of Steel Song. Gothel on 2 into Doc or Minnie into Rapunzel is one of our best lines against them. Cards are king in a matchup like this, so prioritize the card draw. 3 Ink Pongo is never ink if you can help it, as its draw ability proves very strong in this matchup. Mufasa is the premier 5-drop here, as he has far more uses than just questing. His replacement ability can and should be used to insulate us against opposing Be Prepared. Holding him back from questing for 1 or 2 turns to accrue card draw and quest with evasive characters will force the opponent to use a Be Prepared, and Mufasa will replace himself. Remember, the red-purple player will have no problem trading 1 or 2 things into a Mufasa so they can use a Be Prepared and clear the entire board. Our job is to make their cards worse. Versus red-blue, aggression is the game plan. Turn 2 Sleepy, turn 3 Doc, turn 4 Goofy is back-breaking for them. Mufasa on 5 insulates against the turn 5 Be Prepared that they're able to ramp into, and we just rinse and repeat that until we win. They aren't doing anything super relevant for the first 4 turns of the game most of the time, and that's where we can punish them. Versus Blue Steel, we take some notes from our mulligan strategy that we use for Steel Song. However, we want to keep cards like Doc into Maui. Reason being, we want to pressure their Cogsworth as soon as possible. They intend to wheel you, but they can't do it as fast as Steel Song. The goal in this matchup is to always kill their singer, let the evasives do most of the work while your top end plays the fun police. Versus Green Steel, here's the game plan. All jokes aside, we just got to take our lumps in this matchup. Play as much as you can, as fast as you can, so they can't get maximum value from forcing you to discard. Look to send back as many high curve cards as possible in an attempt to ink and play something on every turn of the game. The issue with that deck is they have a hard time dealing with established boards, and we can produce very powerful board states. The only issue is keeping enough cards to establish the board. Ironically, the discard portion isn't the part that gets you. It's the aggressive green portion on top of the discard. Versus Green Purple, we go for an identical mulligan strategy as we do for Green Steel. We need the early plays that can check the early threats. Pray that Ursula can't sing Mother Knows Best, and the game is heavily favored for you. If they can, then things can get super rough. I will note that Scar here is bonkers, and should always be the play if you can survive long enough. Versus Purple Steel, we revisit the same strategy that we used for Red Purple. The mid-range Purple Steel decks do not play wheel, so our hand is safe. They are a steel deck, so Gothel on any turn outside of 6 alongside a Rapunzel is not recommended. Use your 3 willpower characters to make trades or quests. Doc on 3 is the best possible. Maui or Mufasa on 4 represents such an oppressive game state for the Purple Steel opponent. Overall, the power level is very high. Every card, with the exception of Gothel and Simba, quest for 2 or more and represent a threat on their own right that requires an answer from the opponent on every turn of the game. Mufasa being able to flip into a better threat is a very real possibility and can sometimes be a detriment to the opponent. Mufasa turning into a dragon or a Chernabog or a Stitch or even one of the evasive cards is utterly terrifying to most opponents, as it should be. Mufasa, in essence, is a roulette card, and if we aren't playing big chonkers to spin off him, why are we playing him at all? This deck also has a straightforward game plan of pressure the opponent, and if they are unable to keep up with their answers, you steamroll them. We have a favored matchup spread into the top tiers of the metagame: red-purple, red-blue, blue-steel, amber-steel, purple-steel, etc. This version is susceptible to the faster aggro decks. We can turn the corner against them pretty quickly, but it requires some sacrifice on our part. Also, as mentioned previously, we are playing a very fair deck, and that can be exploited by decks doing very unfair things. Jafar Wheel, for example. Our matchup against them is not the best, as we don't have many removal tools to assist in disrupting their game plan. Our evasives aren't strong enough alone to deal with Jafar outright. And we don't play non-character cards like Dragonfire, Teeth, or Bare Necessities to disrupt. This makes us weaker to the lower tiers of the metagame, or as I like to refer to them as, not real. So, green, purple, Jafar, etc. As a matter of fact, the only top-ish tier deck that we're soft to is green steel. Also of note, if the red-purple players revert back to Fishhook, Rafiki, and Pinocchio builds, this list will have to change. How will it change? No idea yet, but if you would like to stay up to date on all the builds and changes I've been through and will be going through with Muf, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, follow me and Labyrinth TCG on our socials located in the description down below, and in order to keep up with some of the top players the game has to offer, go and subscribe to our Patreon, where paid members get one free coaching session a month with your choice of the Lab Boys. Muf and I will be waiting.